obviously the port nozzles haven't arrived yet, but in a way that they did, because in the early days when the supercharger was in front of the motor, like an old Potvin setup, they did have port nozzles.
Oh, yeah.
So
Some did.
right. So when you came around to put the port nozzles on the surfer's car, it wasn't like you invented it, but you reintroduced it.
No, other people were already using them.
Okay.
Other people were doing it. And
Because I hear you get credited a lot for the ones that did the port nozzles, but
I don't think we should, because other people were doing it, but it's like the rear engine car. Rear engine cars have been around forever, and obviously somebody gets credit for it that didn't invent it.
right.
But we didn't invent port nozzles either.
But what I find interesting is that they existed before, but then when the supercharger went from in front of the engine to on top of the engine, they went away. But then they came back.
Well,
Don, what do you think?
Well, the guys that run hard were looking for more ways to put more fuel in it, and there were no manifolds. So finally, somebody talked to Krager, and they made a manifold, and that
Or top hat.
provided everybody with the opportunity to put port nozzle on. Everybody thought about them. The guys with the front mounts ran them, and it turns out that's part of the problem with the front mount is that when the engine is idling, it's got a vacuum, so it sucks all the port nozzles dry. And when you break the throttle open, there's nothing but air, because it's that far from the engine, and it would blow the ducts off, because it would backfire. And so when we ran the front mount, you had when it lit, you had to keep it up off idle, so that the fuel went up to the nozzles in the front, and it still blew up. I mean, it was awful. We went through some kind of blowers. I think 17 was the total.
17
just blowing the blowers
blowers.
off the car. It was terrible.
Yeah, these guys had a record going.
Before you made the switch to the port nozzles, when you were still just 8 nozzles on top, were you already making your own nozzles at that point?
Yes. Once we could see where you should go with all of this, because what we wanted to do is atomize the fuel, and I had got on and studied the books, and you've got to raise the fuel pressure, and you got to make a nozzle that's really well designed. So I started making the nozzles, and we were jacking up the fuel pressure, and then we were changing the nozzles. Every nozzle would be different, and or might be different, or we could make them different, and trying to make the fuel go to all the cylinders. And we were able to make it pretty nice, but you could see that you were never going to really do a good job of it. And then the port nozzle thing sort of showed up, and people were having some reasonable luck with it. So then we went to the port nozzle, and same thing there. We just made our own nozzles, and you can tell when we made our own nozzles because the nozzles get straight, like in this picture. The hose comes around and goes straight into the nozzle. The nozzle isn't a 90 degree. The original Hilborn nozzles, they're like this one here.
Yeah.
The
Got
hose
it.
comes
Yeah,
and makes a
very
90
interesting.
going in.
Yep,
That's the Hilborn style nozzle.
got it.
They probably made straight ones too. Well, they did for sure when it came to port nozzles. But anyway, on the top nozzles, you can always tell a Hilborn because it had that 90 in it.
Right.
And then you can see all of these are always straight.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just a little brass fitting you buy at the automotive supply store, the Napa store or something. They didn't have Napa then, but anyway, and then I'd make a little nozzle insert. We'd solder them together. I'd stamp letters on them so there wouldn't be any numbers. So we just had sort of an A to Z number system. And so we just constantly squeezed the nozzle size down and then made other changes in the fuel system to accommodate the higher and higher pressure, because the known part of the Hilborn fuel injection did not include higher pressure because nobody ran higher pressure. So we just kind of snuck up on that, and it was simple stuff. But
And I think you had the PG 175 pump. I think is what you mostly
probably,
had on the car.
was that the biggest one? No, there was
So
one
it was the
bigger.
next to the biggest.
Yeah, we never used the biggest one. Actually, all the time we raced our car, the fuel mileage got better. We used less fuel as we went along. We never used more.
Like say it was 4 gallons a run at the beginning, and then 3.5 gallons, then 3.25 gallons.
Yeah.
So horsepower was going up and fuel consumption was going down,
And reliability
just through efficiency.
Volumetric efficiency.
Yeah, and then the damage was going down. The stuff was living better.
Mhm.
But that gets back into the atomizing the fuel, because the liquid detonates and the vapor part would burn. Liquid would detonate and it ruins your parts. And it doesn't contribute to making power, it just contributes to ruining your parts. So anyway, we just kept raising the pressure, and we were using maybe 200 pounds when everybody else was using 60 or 70 at wide open. And those are kind of guesses, because we did it all on water faucet with 65 pounds. Or dyno.
Can
How
you
did
say
you
water
shape
fo-
the
what-
nozzle? As
Inside it was
opposed-
a Coke bottle shape.
inside the nozzle itself.
Inside the nozzle, yes. I made some spade drills, flat spade drills, and then put that shape on them. And I studied all the science behind that is called Bernoulli's equation, and it has to do with the way a airfoil shape works on a wing. And all you're doing is it's the conversion of energy. You're taking static pressure, which is energy, but just sitting still, but it's energy, and then you're turning it into velocity. And so
You're running it through a Venturi.
which
Right,
is
yeah.
a Venturi and a carburetor works the same way. As it speeds up, the pressure has to drop because it's called conservation of energy, some law.
Well,
When one goes up, the other one has to go down because the total has to be the same. You don't create energy.
Well, this is the simplest example. If I blow over the top of this piece of paper, I'm increasing the velocity,
Yep.
so the pressure is reducing,
Yeah,
and the page will come up,
right.
blowing over the top of it.
Yes, and that's what makes the airplane fly. And in the case of the nozzle, you want to do that shape because you want to convert this energy and not lose it. When you just take the bottom of the hole goes like that, the drill point angle, and then here's the smaller hole, just all kinds of terrible things happen.
Turbulence and
Yeah,
everything.
you'll lose a lot of the energy. And the other thing that happens, imagine a sink. You got say a stainless sink in a kitchen, it's flat bottom, and then there's the drain. When the water comes down the sink and comes across the floor of the sink, when it goes fast, this one crashes into this one. They don't just, there's no Venturi shape to make this one crashes into that one, which means that energy gets consumed like a head-on collision on the street, right? And then this water's coming this way and runs into the crash, and it's just a mess. So the higher the pressure, the flow goes down because it's just all crashing into each other, right? Where if you make it, it just speeds up, and then the pressure drops. So when the pressure comes out the little hole of your nozzle, it's going faster, and it's going to have a real low pressure. And that's how a siphon spray gun works, right? You take, say, 30 pounds of air pressure coming into the spray gun. You pull the trigger, it speeds up, goes down that little tube, and then there's a tube that goes down into the tank of your paint, right? This gets so negative that it lifts the paint up into the paint, the airstream, right? And that's the siphon type spray gun, right? Same idea. Well, anyway, when it comes out of that nozzle, the more efficiently you do it, the lower that pressure is. So it explodes into the air. Then you have that deflector that it's going to hit. We need the deflector because we need to change the direction. And it's also, we need that real low pressure so it explodes into the air because it's so negative, right?
So a lot of people talk about the fuel pressure being high.
Yep.
A lot of people talk about how many nozzles you had.
Yep.
A lot of people talked about how you ran small diameter nozzles.
Yep.
But the magic was in the nozzle, the Venturi shape. That's what made it all work.
No, that
It-
wasn't
it-
all of it. That was just a key piece.
That's what I'm saying. A key piece. If you had the same nozzle just drilled straight through at 20 thousandths or whatever, it's not going to perform like your shaped nozzles. That was a piece of the magic.
Yes, and there's another aspect to that, is that as the pressure comes up, if you have an inefficient shape and it's all crashing into itself, ineffective, the nozzle, not ineffective, the nozzle will flow less and less as the pressure goes up. And in the drag racing, the cars would leave the starting line, the flames would be high, and the flames would start getting shorter as it went down, and then there'd be a boom.
Right.
Yeah, right.
So that tells you that as the pressure's coming up in the fuel system, as the RPM's coming up, the fuel flow isn't coming up fast enough with it, right? So if we make our shape better, we can cause that to not do that, right? So then we took it a little further in one of our experiments. We decided we took the return line that went back to the tank. At all times, part of the fuel's going back to the tank, right?
Yes.
So we know that square corners and horrible shapes are awful for fuel flow, right? So we took a bunch of like return jets, made our own stuff. We just took a bunch of square corners and made the fuel, just tortured the fuel on its way back to the tank. So as the pressure came up, it got tortured more, right, from all these square corners and
Right.
horrible shapes. And so we made where the flames got longer as it went down the track. But we got carried away and it would just start blubbering when it got to the finish line. Blah, blah, blah,
Just get too rich.
too fat because we didn't have enough magneto to burn it, right? And it would just start blubbering, and we went, I guess we got a little carried away here, so we kind of backed up on that plan. But anyway, with those shapes, it helps you on that.
But when you say shapes, what you're really talking about is you made a planned restriction on the return line. So-
Inefficient plan to refer.
Right. So it was harder for the fuel to return, so more fuel would stay going to the motor.
Yes, because it's just in effect a splitter. The pump is pumping into a T. One goes back to the tank at all times, and one goes into the engine at all times. And you're just affecting the balance of flow at that T point, right?
By restricting the return.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got to go someplace
Or
else,
make
which
the-
is to the
or
motor.
make
causes
the
more
nozzle,
pressure.
make the nozzle side more efficient. More will go that way.
Right.
At X, let's say you had 100 pounds. It'll upset that balance, right? And you can affect that by shapes.
Right.
So anyway, like everything, we took everything too far, because how far is far enough? So we just go too far. Oh,
And then
that's too far.
back up a little bit.
Back up. Oh, right about here. This will be nice.
So you would literally design a nozzle, a jet, and would you hook it up to the water hose or whatever and watch it flow? How would you know that flow coming through that jet was the way you wanted it?
Did you just have like a graduated container and a stopwatch to measure the flow, or how?
We just took a scale, and we put a bucket on it, and then we turned on the faucet with our nozzle. Just got one nozzle going, and we got
And this is at the Red Apple.
at the Red Apple in the alley, and get it going, and the thing's on the scale, and then you got a stopwatch, and then just swing the nozzle over and stick it in the bucket, and go for 5 minutes, let's say. Pull it out of the bucket, and then weigh the bucket, right? How much water have we got? That tells you gallons or pounds per minute, or however you want to do it, right? So now we know how much we got. And when you make these shapes, a bigger hole may flow less than a smaller hole. Say a couple thou difference. But the bigger one might flow less because the shape isn't as nice, right? But then I made these spade drills that came down to a point. So the shape was always the same, and then we could just change the hole size because we're down to small increments at this point. And all of the nozzles, when you got them from Hilborn, they had sizes like 60 and 70. And well, pretty soon we've got 16 nozzles, 8 on the bottom and 8 on the top. You can't use those kind of sizes. So you just go smaller and smaller. So all the sizes end up being sort of in the 30, 40 thousandths range.